Mambition, everyone's like, oh dear. Tiffany's back, and today I don't have Alex to police me and tell me to calm down. Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to Mambition. It's Tiffany, and today I've got Rashi. Love it, love it, love it. So, guys, today I've got Rashi Kakkar with me. She is absolutely incredible, and for anyone who doesn't already know her, you might have seen her work actually that she does outside of a professional like sphere, if that makes sense. I don't know if she finds the time. But yeah, she is an author of Decks and Diapers, and it's a newsletter for working parents that refuses to separate ambition from motherhood. And like I said, outside of that, she's also a global leader at McKinsey's Leadership Center of Excellence, and she works with Fortune 100 companies on unlocking human potential and building large-scale organizational capability. And on top of that, she's also a mum of two, a golfer, and she recently picked up pickleball, which I'm not actually sure what pickleball is. What is pickleball, Rashi?
Yes, so pickleball is think of it as tennis and table tennis or ping pong had a baby, and you just sort of squeeze the size of the court, and the
All right,
rackets are a little different. So it's I think lawn tennis, but maybe after you become a mom, it's a little easier on your joints.
fair
So
enough.
yeah, that's what I've been doing. But thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Love it. I know we actually found you initially from your works with Decks and Diapers because you had myself and Alex on, and that was really fun, by the way. I think it was really nice to be on the other side of the conversation for once.
It was lovely to get to know both of you. And I think I'm all for people having passion projects and, having multiple identities and then sort of doing things which are beyond just one narrow definition of who they are. So I was very thrilled to sort of stumble onto your work and meet both of you.
Love it. But yeah, I think one thing I kind of thought about as a really good place to start was the idea that we're both with what you're doing with Decks and Diapers and what we're doing with Ambition. I feel like we're both flies on the wall, in a place that yes, it gets talked about a lot, but it's full like there's still so much more to say about it. You know, the whole idea of motherhood, how women are balancing this with ambition, with their identity, with their passions. And I'm quite really, really want to know what made you feel that you wanted to add something. What made you feel compelled to start like Decks and Diapers?
Yeah, so the origin story really is like back when I was pregnant with my first kid. I was in my maternity leave, and this was also literally COVID, right? So 2020, my baby, my oldest one was born March 2020, so we got smack into the middle of the lockdown. And as I was sort of getting my bearings again, it was the summer of 2020, I remember, and I was thinking about return to work, and I was navigating a lot of sort of shifts in identity, right? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my career? Being a mom, I did not have friends or cousins, etc. I knew who'd sort of done this. I'm sort of the oldest on my mom's side, dad's side, and all my friends were like, nobody was having babies. So I naturally started reading things on the internet, and I found something very interesting, which was either people would only talk about like work and career as if you're completely unencumbered, you have nothing else happening in your life. So, you have 24 hours and they're all yours. And so it was all about, do ABC to sort of succeed. I was like, okay, that doesn't make sense for me now. Or as I was reading about how do you become a better sort of mother to this human being, right? How do I sort of do right by this person I've brought into the world? It assumed that that's all I do, right? And there's nothing else happening in my life except motherhood. So I sort of rejected that, and I couldn't really find something which would what I call it, honor these sort of dual ambitions, right? Of wanting professional success, wanting to do something out in the world, but also wanting personal fulfillment or wanting to do something when it comes to, raising your family and raising them right. And then so randomly, literally, I think it was 1 a.m., I was actually changing my daughter's diaper. And I remember telling my husband at that point, I was like, you know what, tomorrow morning I'm going to get up, I'm going to go online, and I'm going to start this newsletter, and I'm going to call it Decks and Diapers. So he
Wow.
mumbled something in his sleep. He was like, okay, yeah, okay, whatever. And that's literally it. There was no grand plan. I woke up the next morning. I logged onto the internet. I saw Substack, and I just sort of started it, and I started reaching out to people who I thought were sort of honoring this dual identity, this dual sort of ambition, started finding them on the internet, and now people find me and people sort of refer people to me, and I just started having these conversations. And it started just with me initially being like, teach me how to be like this, because I wanted to be this way. And then slowly it sort of grew into a community. So that's literally the original story, that I wanted to read something like this. I couldn't find it in the world. And so I was like, why not just, create it?
I love that so much. It's like you're trying to solve something in yourself, or it's almost as if you're at the end of Decks and Diapers. You're trying to, I don't know, do you feel like you're trying to become what you envision as the ultimate?
I think so. I think so. And I think maybe it was part like coaching therapy. Like I also have, in the last couple of years, met sort of professional coach also, because I think it was a little bit of me trying to unlearn the way I'd been. I was a very sort of typical type A student. I come from a family of physicians. My parents were both doctors. So, just generally grew up with a very sort of singular idea of what it means to be maybe successful, and what it means, to sort of have a place in the world. And just motherhood, I think, was so intense for me when it hit me, where I suddenly realized that it is very demanding. It is. I don't think people talk about the challenging aspect of it. And then also because I think maybe it happened in COVID, which was very isolating. I also felt very, very alone. So I think it started just by me finding people to have a conversation in the absence of being able to step out into the world because we were locked into an apartment. I think it was my way of sort of getting some sense of a community built around me. And so I always tell people, like, Decks and Diapers very selfishly was a project started for an audience of one, that is me. And I think the reason why I do it, and the reason why it's also organically grown, is because there's nothing commercial about it, right? There's no sort of end goal where I'm trying to push out a product or a course or something. It's just, I think, similar to how you and Alex started this. It just started as a space to explore my own sort of curiosity and meet
Yeah.
interesting people from around the world.
No, I get that. I feel like I mean, we're like 100 and 15 episodes in, and I generally feel that I can see us getting to 1,000 episodes very
Yeah.
easily, just because I feel like I'm there as we're raising these children, they're raising us. And again, well, like what you said, is like I think motherhood just really questions so much about you, what you want out of the world. And I often think that now my ambition includes my ambition for my children, and I cannot let that go. I can't just imagine myself being, I don't know, financially successful, but like dropping the ball on that. And he got me thinking about, recently I was reading, I don't know if you know, All the Places You Go by Dr. Seuss.
I've heard of the book, and
Yeah,
I've read it multiple times. But yes,
yeah. We love that book so much. And I remember I read it and I thought, oh my God, we need this version for like mothers. Because I feel like it's, and I put a spin on it. So I said, today's your day. Your baby's born. You're off to great places, but wait, you feel torn. You have dreams in your head. You have goals in your heart, but suddenly everything falling apart. Who am I now? You wonder, where did I go? As you rock them at 3 a.m., feeling so low. You look in the mirror at the stranger you see. I used to have plans. What happened to me? So I feel like for me, that's what my ambition is about. It's this sense of like, I know something's changed, but I want to figure it out, and I want to bring other people along, and I want to learn from them. But at the same time, I know you made a post recently about kind of what you've concluded, and where do you think you're at now then in this sort of, I don't know, this motherhood, this ambition sort of
yeah,
journey?
yeah. Before we go there, by the way, that was
Mm.
amazing. What you just
Oh,
said, you
thank
should
you.
publish that. You should figure out a way to get, I guess you'll have to navigate some sort of licensing rights or something. But I was like, wow, I would read that with some illustrations. That would make a great book to give someone who just became a mom. That was amazing. I will encourage you to finish that little prose. But it was phenomenal. Now to your question around, what I've concluded from, say, 100 conversations, right? I think
Mm.
for me, these conversations are obviously very micro, but I was stepping back and I said, look, I've done over 100 of them. Like, what is the macro trends, right? There are a few of them. But I think the one thing that hit me, and I know, we've sort of spoken about this, was that, I mean, motherhood or parenting is hard, right? Like, I think um, for too long, maybe we have undervalued or downplayed motherhood a little bit. I think culturally people talk about mother sacrifice and people thank their moms, but as a society, generally the work that women do when it comes to motherhood, I think has been sort of undervalued. And so even when it comes to success or ambition, it's very narrowly defined, right? People are only sort of applauded or made to feel special for what they do, which is attached to maybe their professional identity or things that quote unquote make money for themselves or create let's say shareholder value, right? And so I think the first thing is that this is a really really important thing, and it's hard, right? As we've discussed, it's there is no hack here, there is no silver bullet. Motherhood is hard because it is difficult, but it's also really important. If you think about it, your kids are going to hopefully for everybody outlive them, and they are your true legacy, right? From 100 200 years from now, my child will be telling their great grandchildren hopefully my story, and that honestly is my legacy and nothing else, right? A lot of times we sort of undervalue that aspect of we undervalue that aspect and overinflate a lot of other things that we do
Yeah.
professionally, etc., right? So I think that's one big conclusion. The second thing is that a lot of people, especially like call it influencers or whatever online, create content and tell you, everybody has the same 24 hours, or these are some of my hacks. I mean, what I realized was, and it was obvious to me, but I think being a mom made it more obvious that it's a spectrum. And the only way to sort of reduce, in the absence of sort of institutions and structure and society solving it for us, the sort of motherhood becomes easier depending on where you are on that privilege spectrum, right? And so if you are someone who has the privilege to be able to get, say, paid help, or you have family that can step in, the reality that you live is drastically different from, say, a woman who doesn't have access to any of that, right? And so I am very transparent with people that right now I'm on my second maternity leave, and folks are like, how do you get time to maybe record a podcast, or how are you still writing or still reading? You'd see a stack of sort of unread books right there. And I tell them, it's not because I'm special or I have more discipline than you, or I can function on like 3 hours of sleep or anything. I mean, I have the privilege where my husband steps in, and we have the privilege of getting some sort of, right now we live far away from family, so we get some paid help in the morning. And I have a wonderful sitter who sort of watches the baby for a few hours while I get to go work out. I get to write, I get to read, I get to just fill my cup so that I can pour back into my family, right? And so I think that was the other big conclusion, that all the tips, tricks everybody sort of shared, there was some layer of privilege to it, right? And I think sometimes people recognized it, and there were some people who just did not sort of recognize the fact that their tips and tricks were all assuming different layers of privilege around a family, of a partner who's supportive, of sort of getting paid help. And I think maybe those are sort of two big so what so far out of those 100 conversations. And I've spoken to people across the world, across countries. It's easier relatively in some countries where our governments take care of childcare. There's more sort of maternal leave. It's harder in some countries where none of that is available. But I think irrespective of where you are in the world, it is tough, but it is also, I think, one of those things that people said gives them immense joy and fulfillment, and was such a transformative experience that I think, like you said, our kids raise us more than we raise them. Everybody said that they've learned so much more about themselves as a human, and they feel like they've become a bigger version of themselves after becoming a parent. And it's altered life, but it's altered life for the better. So I know I went on a bit of a ramble, but I'd say maybe those are the three sort of big so what's that came out of it, right? That it's hard, it's important work, it's been undervalued, it shouldn't. There is a lot of privilege. The privilege helps you get help, which helps you feel better. And then the last bit being that it sort of changes you, and it changes you maybe for the better.
No, but it really does. I think, like for me, makes me see Mambition going into like a forever mode of
Uh-huh.
always having content. Is just the unlimited amount of rich content I get from being a mother. I get so much from observing my children. The
Mhm.
way that, for example, my two children have such different personalities, And I realize what motivates them is completely different. So I consistently have to kind of tweak how I address them, how I motivate them. I think about what I thought motherhood was before I became a mum. I think about things like, for example, even like traditional self care doesn't always work. For me now, self care sometimes is having a flask or, I don't know, some people call it flask, some people call it a thermal bottle.
Uh-huh.
When I'm at the park with them, having hot coffee for myself allows me to enjoy this journey of motherhood a bit more. I think about how, for example, I've had to close down my 45 tabs and keep two open in order to
Yeah, yeah,
live in this way that's meaningful. I think about how I can't do the 5 a.m. productivity thing. For me, that's a trap personally, because if I wake up too early before the kids, and I'll be too tired when they wake up, and I'm grumpy. So I really think that what I'm finding is that I think it's a combination of the inner work that you do on yourself and also the experiences that you've had in life. I think once you put the two together, you almost create like an imprint, and then you can be much more authentic with your motherhood journey. I know before we started, you kind of talked about, your journey to motherhood with your
uh-huh.
second daughter. I'd love to hear a bit more about that, because I think it's that journey, isn't it, that maybe gives you something, that gives you that conviction as well about how and the type of mum you want to be.
Yeah, yeah, no, sure. And maybe this is the first time I'm actually publicly sort of talking about it. So, I mean, here goes. Like I mentioned, with my first, that pregnancy, I'd sort of been a competitive athlete growing up. I was in my 20s. I'd say physically pretty sort of fit. And that was the smoothest pregnancy you could ever dream of, right? Like, we weren't even like actively trying. Like, we sort of got pregnant and we were both like, let's do this a little earlier than maybe we wanted a kid. But it happened and it was smooth. And through the pregnancy, I think the first 4 or 5 months I was doing CrossFit and hiking. And so baby came and no drama, right? And so I think I feel like, call it God or call it whatever, the spiritual beings out there have a way of humbling us. Both me and my husband were very clear we wanted 2 kids at least. We both have loving relationships with our siblings, and so a year or so later, I was like, okay, maybe we're ready for a second, and he was like, yeah, let's do it. And I think both of us were naive enough to assume that it would be like the first journey, right? Like, we want to get pregnant, we'll get pregnant, the baby will come here, and that's about it, right? And so I got pregnant, and we had a loss, and that was it was very confusing, it was very disturbing. But I'm a very rational sort of being too, and so I knew the stats, and I knew the and I wasn't like very old or anything, still very much in the healthy range of having a kid, but I sort of knew the stats around losses, and so we sort of rationalized it, and I was like, okay, 1 in 3, and whatever this was, we just got hit with it. It'll happen next time, and so um, after that we tried again. We were open to it, and it didn't take us a long time to get pregnant, but took us some time, which was also surprising. I went through some tests, and he went through some tests, and the doctors were like, you both are fine, this will happen when it happens. It just, you know life's changed and you've changed, so we'll see. And then we got pregnant again. And this time around, like, I got pregnant with multiples, which again was actually surprising and shocking. I did not know that naturally I could conceive. I conceived triplets. I had no idea that naturally you could do it, but obviously, because they were triplets, there was a certain amount of risk to that pregnancy. And so I was maybe about 12 odd weeks where just things started going slightly haywire, including a couple of visits to the ER, and then things were just declared very, very risky. And at that point, doctors were like, there is a high probability that not just one, you might lose all, but we'll take it till where we did. And so then I very distinctly remember, like, Diwali is a pretty big festival for us, but that Diwali night I started, sort of bleeding, and I was like, okay, this is going south again. And I think that really, really like bothered me and my husband. Like, I think the fact that it happened to us, because the odds keep reducing, it's like happening consecutively now is and then this natural conceiving multiples again. I was like, all these like weird probabilities, which is like one in a blah number has it. I'm like, why am I now this? I want to be special, but not special when it comes to all this, right? Being hit by all these like odd probabilities. And again, we sort of kept scratching our head, and the doctors couldn't figure anything. But because there'd been sort of 2 pregnancies pretty close to each other, physically, I was I'd obviously accumulated weights. The hormones had sort of gone up and down with all the progesterone levels going up and down, and so I wasn't feeling my best. But then, once all was cleared and the doctor said you could try it again, we got pregnant for a third time, and I do remember telling him that if this happens, this happens. If not, then like I am taking a break from all this because I definitely want a sibling for my kid, but I cannot be spending 2.5 years of my life being pregnant because it just puts a lot of sort of mental strain on you. Like everything becomes about the pregnancy, and so um, thankfully, that pregnancy went well, and I have a wonderful little baby now. But it was such a different experience from my first, where in my first I was like working out and I had no care in the world, and this time the doctors had told me like sort of no lifting any weights, bare minimum movement. They were a little worried about things going wrong, and so there was a lot more like frequent visits, a lot more like blood works, blood being drawn, etc. Throughout, and I would, till the baby literally arrived, I was nervous and scared. I was a complete wreck, and so I think my average sort of baseline cortisol level was pretty elevated. So I think like you said, two children, their personalities are different. For me, it started like while they were in my womb. It's like, wow, like one of them was, my oldest was such a different experience just going through that pregnancy. And I was so, maybe I don't want to use the word cocky, but in my head, I never understood I mean, I had the empathy, right? When I meet people who really want a kid or people who go through losses, like I understand, like I understood that, okay, this hurts them, but I don't think I fully was able to really empathize with them, with that sort of longing for a child or that confusion as to, why is my body not able to do this when it just could, like feeling almost cheated by your own sort of being, and then being very alone because we a few of our close friends knew, my parents knew, my brother knew, but a lot of people had no idea that for these like 2.5 years we were carrying this sort of silent grief, and we also didn't want to wanted to affect our older child, right? And so you almost felt like you were living like this weird sort of dual identity where there was a lot of like sadness and pain, but also you were also very chirpy and sort of moving on with life like nothing was happening. And so yeah, I mean both the babies are very special, but this one, she was born in October, and I remember sort of quoting a Taylor Swift lyrics. I don't know if you know about the song Opalite, but it says,
Of
I was
course.
sleepless in the onyx night, and now the sky is opalite. So she's also
Oh,
born in October, so opal's like her birth
yeah.
stone kind of thing. So I was just laughing and telling a bunch of my friends that I think I really feel like the last 2.5 years in some ways were very dark, and now
Wow.
I feel like there's a lot of light around me.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Rashi. I think, yeah, it's interesting just how different everyone's journey to motherhood is. And
Mhm.
I just think I never knew as well, just how much people go through just to be a mother or to be a parent. And I just think it's interesting how they, what they teach us. And I often think about, like, for example, you can, and I love to hear your take on this, like this idea of like, when I see people online, maybe talk about parenting, how hard it is, like I think we should just give them a moment, because I think sometimes people kind of gloss it up as like, oh, becoming a parent such a miracle, you should enjoy it all the time. Like it's okay to be tired, but be grateful. It's okay to, whatever your journey is, let's just respect people's kind of like, I don't know, like thoughts on it. And that's why sometimes I think it's kind of this weird balance, isn't it? But also your experience of motherhood will often inspire you to, like I said, create your own way of living it. Like, for example, because I lost my mom when I was quite young, and I'm now the age that close to the age that she was when she
Mhm.
passed away. I have this weird kind of urgency about my life and making the most of time with the kids. It's a blessing, but it's also a curse. It's what inspires me to do my ambition, despite knowing I don't have time. It's what inspired me to live intentionally. But at the same time, I know sometimes I'm one of those people, I need to ease up the gas a bit. So it's weird, isn't it, how all this experience shapes us? And I'd love to hear, how has this shaped you in terms of where you are now? Because I know that shaping will change as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it definitely, to your point, right? It definitely sort of has made me a little bit more intentional about living this life, which I don't want to use the word balance because I think a lot of
I
people
know.
talk
No.
about it, but this idea that a lot of us sort of when we see people or a certain side of them, say be it online or sitting on panels and podiums, we only see one aspect of their life, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people who would have met me in the last 2.5 years, or a lot of people who probably know me. I mean, I know there's a certain perception that people have that, okay, Rashi's like constantly winning. And yes, I mean, I try a lot and I do a lot. And so it might look that way, but I think there was like a lot of like sadness and grief also over the last 2.5 years. And so I think what it's taught me is that obviously take people on face value and what they share. Everybody's not going to tell you their deepest darkest sort of secrets or pain as you meet them, but I think not make assumptions, right? Because it's very easy to be cynical about some people or be like, oh, their life's perfect. I think everybody's sort of carrying their own is dealing with, just like life is always, I think it's sort of regression to the mean takes place, right? If anybody says their life's always perfect, I sometimes feel like they're lying. If someone's like, my life is miserable, I'm like, is it really? Like, you're not looking at things. I do think life sort of makes sure everybody regresses to the mean. So I think that's definitely one, just like being more sort of conscious around everybody, and understanding that people, giving them space and the grace. And the other thing that I've started doing more is just being more open about it. I think for me, what was also very isolating as I was going through this journey was not, I mean, there were a few friends who had shared their losses with me, right? Some of them had multiple losses, and I think being able to talk to them felt great, but there were a bunch who'd never like told me anything had ever gone wrong with them, right? And they'd always sort of painted this picture of perfection. And to me, I was, as I think about what kind of a friend and human I want to be, I've realized that I'd rather be the person who sort of tells you as it is, shows you my truth, kind of is more raw and open, so that you feel more seen, versus pretend that everything is great, and that makes you feel worse about yourself. And I think that's also a reason why, even with Decks and Diapers, right? I try and have honest conversations so that even if it's somewhere somebody reading this, I don't want them to feel alone, right? Otherwise, in the absence of people being open about things that they're going through, you feel shitty about yourself because you feel, okay, everybody else has it together. I may be the broken one, without realizing that we all in some ways are sort of broken, damaged. Some of us just hide it, right? And so I think that's the other thing that's changed is I am very open about this. I talk to people upfront about this, and I know a few of my own friends went through this recently, and I've picked up the phone and said, hey, look, like, I don't know how much you know about my story, but we can talk about this. There's no shame. There's like, you're not doing anything wrong. Like, this happens. So I think maybe those two things, and to your point, maybe the third thing around just more grateful for life, right? Like you said, right? Like I've for someone who was perfectly healthy and healthy to the point that doctors would be like, you're fine, to the last couple of years where, I mean, the female body is magical. It's produced two beings, but it's also been through, I tell people pregnancy and childbirth is its own sort of trauma. I've been through like hormones going up and down, reached the ER, had blood pressure issues, things that I'd never known could happen to me, that I think, like you, have also understood that we're on this planet for a finite period of time, and life is beautiful, and your health is everything, and it's important to take care of it, and it's also important to make the most of it, because
Yeah.
we really are here for a small period of time. And it could, even for me, in the last, I was thinking 2.5 years, there were 2-3 times when things could have just gone south very quickly. So I think it's definitely given me more appreciation for life.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I get that. I think I suppose that's why I said like where have you arrived at? Because I do think we can't we can't gloss over like the darkness of
Mhm.
dark times as well. And that's always something that I always like make sure that sometimes we can sit with. We can sit with the fact that sometimes life is crap. I one of my favorite quotes by Oscar Wilde is that we're all in the gutter, but some of us are
Mhm.
looking at the stars. And I
Mhm.
really love that because I think it just sheds a light on like life. It often in is it's okay to like feel like it's crap and it's not something I've gone into a lot of detail with for me, even on Mambition. But in the past 8 to 9 months, I've had one of the darkest times of my life, and OMG, it's been very rough. So I think sometimes it's not toxic to tell people that, life's crap and we've
Yeah.
had a bad time. But personally, I think for me, I don't know what I'm wired like that, but my brain is always searching for like a way forward. My brain is always searching for a reason to keep moving. So even though I look at my life and I'm like, oh my, losing my mom, the things I've been through, I realize that for example, my kind of thing around like tragedy or sadness, is that I think it gives us perspective. And sometimes I think I'm glad I've got this, even though, losing my mom wasn't what I wanted in my life, but I know it's made me the sort of person I am today. Number one of that is this idea that I often think about like my mom, for example, when I think about the fact that when she passed away, my brother was about 1 year old, and I realized that she probably never got past the point of him being out of like a babysit in a car or something. But so this idea for me is like I'm gonna live alongside my children. That's one of the things I got from that. I'm not waiting for someday. I'm not waiting for them to leave home or go to university. I'm gonna have the version of life that I can have now. And I'm not saying it doesn't come with constraints or like limitations. I'm not saying I can go clubbing on Fridays, but what I'm saying is what can I build when they go to bed? What can I build when Nana's looking after them? And I think when you look at your life, I feel like that's how you can have your ambition alongside motherhood.
100% right, because again with you I feel like life is this is happening right now, and I think it's honestly a failure mode when people get into this, that the if then thinking. I mean, you could call it in motherhood, but I know people do it. If I get this promotion, then I'd be happy, or if I
Yeah,
get to be at this point in my life, or if I get to this end of year vacation, I'd be happy. It's like, no, like life cannot be about like constantly, like, yes, it's about striving and doing things, but you cannot live and pause your life for some arbitrary date, which is why I find the whole concept of retirement honestly a bit like crazy. Not because I think we need to quote unquote keep working forever, but I'd be damned if like at some point my life is about doing nothing but just vegetating, right? Like in my head, I don't, I know some people like right now we're in our 30s and they're looking forward to retirement. And to me, that's a way of saying that I hate my life so much that I want to escape from it, right? Like I'm like, no, I love my life. I love what I do. I hope I have the cognitive ability and the physical ability to keep doing interesting things. Still, like I'm on planet Earth, right? And so I am 100% with you that, just because you are now playing a different role or identity doesn't mean your past self needs to completely die, right? Like you said, it's constraints and changes. I mean, there are, time is a constraint, but I
yes.
also don't need to completely lose myself. And so I know like some women become moms and then that just becomes like everything about them. That's all they're talking to their friends about. That's all that they seem to sort of know about. And to me, I actually feel really bad for them because I'm like, you'll burn out. You've turned motherhood into this like chore, and you're going to be burnt out from this, and you will lose yourself, and you'll wake up in 2 3 years and you'll sort of not recognize who you are, right? And so I think it's so important for women to get into motherhood but still continue having parts of them that made them, right? Like it could be what you do maybe at work, it could be hobbies, it could be friendships, it could be sometimes just actually not talking about being a mother, right? I sometimes love meeting some of my friends and we
Yes.
just do our
Other things.
thing or go out and play a sport, and like I don't want to talk about that identity or that aspect of my life. And so I'm completely with you that life is sort of happening right now, and it's pointless to pretend that one day we'll get to live our life when kids go off to college or something, some arbitrary timeline like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's a different. And you agree as well. Like mother is a different ball game. Like I said, the time, your energy, even your priority. By the way, I learned the other day. It's priority, not priorities.
Oh,
We've actually
cool.
like we made it plural, but
Interesting.
originally when the word priority came into English, it's actually priority. And I think which goes back to the fundamental fact that it has to be a single thing, a single
Yeah.
focus, which makes sense. So priority, I feel like it's energy, it's time, but I also think it's again, like I said, something about like rewriting what success means for me in this chapter of life. Knowing that, as I said, it's what kind of children am I raising? That's
Uh-huh.
important. And little things. I think I've thought about like how I can simplify my life sometimes to make sure that I'm living according to what matters to me and not like comparing, not like you said, wanting to be like other people, looking at how we use social media. So I just think there's so much around that sort of identity aspect of it as well that makes this time more intentional. So to kind of summarize for me, it's been about like I said, thinking about the type of mother I want to be, think about the type of children I'm raising, think about me on my deathbed and what will matter. Think about the fact that you can't do everything, but you can do few things really well. Think about the comparison. Think about simplifying my life, and a lot of that is again, it's been like even financially, thinking that I'm much more nowadays focused on understanding what I need to be
Mhm.
happy, but that makes life meaningful to me rather than trying to maybe keep up with the Joneses. So I'd love to hear about what makes this season of like really meaningful to you and in line with how you want motherhood to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of stuff that you've sort of covered too, right? I think I've also sort of come to realize that life is about a bunch of things like happening together, and me, and I know you said, it's not priorities, it's priority, but it's also not. What I've come to realize is that, look, like in my life, like, this idea of, and again, I don't want to use the word balance, but for me there are like few things which are important to me, right? My kids are important to me, my health is important to me, professionally what I do is important to me. And I think what motherhood has also done for me has, with that constraint of time, made me razor focused on things that matter and things that move the needle for me, and only be focused on that and treat everything else as noise and sort of deprioritize, right? And so I've become very good at saying no to things. I used to be the kind of person who would say yes to everything and anything and take on more, more, more. But I think once I became a mom, I have realized it's brought the things that matter to me very clearly into focus. And so I've become very good about saying no to things that just don't add sort of any value to me. And I think the second thing that just again what I think is important for me is also what we said, right? I think the last 2 years, especially, and like 2, 3 visits to the ER, and with things medically very quickly sort of going south, but being okay, it's also sort of made it very clear to me that, like, I have this life, I have one life, and I'm living this life for myself, and I'm not living this for ABC person, and I'm not living it for like accolades I will get from random strangers who will tomorrow forget my name. It is truly for like me and my kids that I'm living this life. And so doing things that gives me joy, happiness, fulfills my curiosity so that I can be like a fully present human to them, versus me doing things because I think it'll look nice for random strangers, but being miserable and broken from inside and then taking it all out on my sort of family, right? And so I know someone said this, I don't know who said this quote, but it said that, our work self gets our best self and our kids sometimes get our leftovers. And so I think in this season of life, and what I really want to do is make sure my kids don't feel like they got my leftovers. Like, I do want to give my best self out to the world and to the people I work with professionally, but I don't want it to become a place where I'm so like miserable at what I'm doing because it's so far apart from my true self
Wow.
that, I feel like I'm living like this weird disjointed life, that I come and I take out all that crankiness on my kids or make them feel like they were never sort of a priority, or they were never a source of joy or love for me, right? And so I don't know if that answers the question really,
Oh, it
uh,
does. It
but
does. I
that's where I'm thinking right now, or that's where my head is at.
No, it does because I think it's and I feel like there for every mother, there are parts of your life that makes your life the version of your life that you have right now. And I think again, we don't do Mambition or even Decks and Diapers to advise people because I just think there's so much advice and there's a lot of information out there. I think it's clues, it's little things that people can take away or um, things that people can reflect on and they can say, okay, that applies to me, that doesn't. Because I think
Yeah.
ultimately, what makes motherhood so meaningful and what can make you have peace in motherhood, I really think it's about this balance of knowing yourself and kind of, consciously making your own choices and the choices that make sense to you. Because there's just so much out there, and doesn't mean it will it's a lot of noise. So I think it really is about knowing yourself and knowing like what's important to you, looking at your life, doing a bit of an audit, and then kind of like selecting those things, because I think you also have to make peace with the way you do motherhood, and I think that's quite important. Yeah, yeah, because again, it's what you said about even saying no, for example. That's something that typically a lot of women struggle with. But it's interesting how, like I said, I always think fundamentally you can be anything, but you can't be everything. So it's this idea of I don't know, just like closing the loop maybe and making
Yeah.
that choices, which itself can be hard to do.
I love that. I love that. And I think also, I know that this like false idea people have that, when women become mothers, they sort of become smaller versions of themselves. I actually think they could become bigger versions of themselves. I think it just, like I said, if you're intentional about it, it should clarify what sort of version of you want to be, right? I don't think, I think I've actually sort of I've taken more space. I've filled on a big, I now paint in a bigger canvas than I ever did before I became a mom. And that's what I tell people, right? Because a lot of people, I know some of my friends who are still on the fence about having kids. It's all like, oh, life will change, and it all becomes about kids, etc. And I don't think so. And I think, which is why stuff like what you are doing, and even Decks and Diapers, this is important, like you said, because it's not advice. It's more like ethnography, or like, like we're like anthropologists, whatever you want to call it. We're just showing stories of people living different versions, and hopefully telling the world that there's not one way to do this, right? Like there are, I mean, across spectrum, men and women I've spoken to, who are living different versions of being great parents, but loving what they're doing with their life, right? And I think that for me is this idea of once you become a parent, it gives you that time, space, and clarity to lean into like who you really want to be, not because your high school friends told you that's what you want to be, or some like school counselor told you that's what you want to be, or uh, it really is because as you close your eyes and think about your final days on earth, you're like, that's like, how will my kids remember me, right? And part of
Yeah.
what you do professionally is part of it, but how you show up for them, the kind of friends you have, how you showed up for them, who you were outside of your work, I think is equally important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes, so what I've also found, Rashi, is that it's a narrative. I feel like it's a narrative you're telling yourself often that justifies the decisions you make. Like, for example, I say to myself, okay, right now, they're 3 and 5. It may
Uh-huh.
look as if mummy's not always there, like, sitting and holding their hands and staring at them in the eyes. They go to nursery, they go to grandparents, which they love. But to me, I think, wow, like, the mother you need is this version of the mother, this one that has a career, because my career builds, my confidence, it builds skills in me that will help you as you get older. When you're 10, 15, 20, you need relationship advice, you need someone to sit with you in chaos and sadness and not get buried in that sadness, but be able to hold you and strengthen you. When you need someone who's going to give you life advice, when you need someone who's going to be strong for you. I just think it's the mother they will need that this version of me is building.
I get that. And also, like, again, this is a personal story, but I'm a product of a working mom. And I
Okay.
mentioned my mom's a physician. So she was actually a physician with the Indian Army, and she sort of rose to become a one-star general. So phenomenal lady, honestly. Like I keep telling her that I don't think I can ever sort of,
Mm,
become you, because you weren't just like a sort of cancer pathologist. You also were a one-star general, so not competing at all there. But she used to put on her uniform, go to work every day, go do amazing things, went for conferences sort of with me around. I very distinctly remember when I was in maybe grade 2 or 3, I forget, but I know she studied for her super speciality, so she was giving exams and coming home after like spending a full day at the hospital and working again. And honestly, Tiffany, like for me, she was the coolest person in the world, right? Like as a kid. And I remember like having some meltdowns and tantrums and sort of being like, okay, my mom's not always in the house compared to some of my friends. But I really valued her having an identity. Like it used to fill my heart with pride when we'd go off like randomly, casually to the neighborhood, say grocery store, right? And people would recognize her, or when I'd see her put on her uniform, and
wow.
especially growing up in a country like India, which is very patriarchal, see like groups of men salute her because she was, in rank, like, she was an officer who was rising in the ranks. And it would fill me with immense joy. And as a little girl, I genuinely felt like I could do what I wanted and own the world because I saw this woman in front of me in my head doing that, right? And I still talk to her, and I sometimes ask her when things are hard, I'm like, how did you do it? Because I had to travel for work, and I travel for work frequently. And my mom was like, I used to do it with you. Sometimes you'd be with your grandparents, sometimes with your father. You've turned out fine, right? And so I think, like, I'm obviously blessed that I have someone, literally my own mother, who I could lean and ask these things. But like you said, right, like what your kids also need in that moment, I think they need a parent who's obviously a role model. They need a parent who they know is there for them. But
Yes.
and this might be controversial, I don't necessarily think kids need their parents to 24/7, their moms to be attached to their hip, right, and make their entire personality being a mom to a kid, right? I don't think, I think at a certain point children too start rejecting that idea of like their own parent, or start minimizing what their parents do, and not respecting them to the same amount that they would, knowing that their mom has other things that she does out in the world, which is not just being mother to them. So I don't know, maybe I'm sort of, I have my biases being obviously a parent of a mother who worked her entire life. But I think just, and I don't want to even say paid work, I think just women not losing themselves to motherhood and continuing to doing things outside, I think really helps our children, versus sort of let go of every bit of them and just be like, now all I'm going to do is 24/7, just sort of smother you with my love.
But it's that sacrificial narrative, though, isn't it? It's so pushed on women. I've seen it so many times. Even psychologists, all the psychologists have said that, if children are with their mothers between 0 and 5, they failed, and, the man should go to work, the woman should stay home, because that is the best way to raise. I think it's quite a strong narrative, and I
It is.
think for women, I think sometimes that's where the guilt comes from. It's like, am I actually destroying my children's life by not being with them? But no, you make a good point, because I do think it's not the qualities, it's not the qualities, the quantity, isn't it? What I found is I've noticed my children's rhythms of when they're much more kind of receptive to me. And you're right. I think someone was saying the other day, just because you sit in the house with your child maybe 24/7 doesn't mean you have an amazing, you will have a better relationship with them
Yeah,
than someone else who goes to work. Because I definitely think it's about like recognizing moments when maybe your children are much more receptive. For example, my son's 5, taking him to school and bringing him back. That's our time when I know he will tell me everything. It will
mhm.
just, it's like a, information dump. Mommy, I love you, mommy. It just has so much to say during the time. And throughout the rest of the day, except for bedtime, I just find out he's just wanting to like be himself. He wants to play. He wants to do other things. He wants to be with other people. So I definitely think a lot of times it's about understanding our own head, the narrative of that sacrifice, and how we're internalizing that, and also observing in our children what connection really means to them, or which moments they want to connect, and building on those. But yeah, I think
Spot on.
it's not a quality thing,
No,
quantity
and
thing.
100%, right? It's exactly that. And I think it's also the concept of that filling your cup, right? I think if you're 24/7 with your kids, but you sort of feel burnt out and you hate who you have become and you feel like, oh, I miss my past self, I do think you'd be sort of resentful, and that like your kids will be able to get that energy, right? And so to me, it's like, one is just that, like, what will make me be the best version to them. And for again, this is different for every woman, right? For me, it is having my own sort of doing things outside, right, outside of motherhood, doing like writing. It's doing things like this. It gives me a lot of energy. It's like reading a stack of books. And I think the other thing that was very important for me was also to help my daughter understand that, look, like, we all operate outside our own little bubble and in the world too. And so I think in the UK you call it nursery. Here in Canada we call it daycare. But my daughter started daycare pretty young. She was 10, 11 months when we started daycare with her. And it was me telling her every day, look, like, we're a family, all of us, mommy, daddy, we go out into the world, we make friends, we do our thing. Your thing is going and sort of learning all these skills. My thing is like doing something in the world. Your dad's is doing this in the world. And then we come back as a family. Because we're apart from each other doesn't mean we don't love each other. I don't. But we all have, purposes, and we do things outside in the world too, and then come back, right? And I think it was for me just very important that my child knows that you can love people, but you don't always have to be with them 24/7. And it's important to do something in the world, right? Even if it's like whatever it meant for a 1, 2, 3. I mean, now she's in kindergarten, so she's obviously a lot older and she absolutely loves school and friends. But I think that also was very important for me to role model for her that we all have a place in the world, and in a place in society, and all of us need to be sort of functioning members of society, and that means whatever it means, right? It could be volunteer work, it could be paid work, but we should all sort of aspire to do things which are beyond just our immediate nuclear family.
I like that. And I was saying recently, my son said, he said, Mummy, every time I go to grandma and granddad's house, I don't think about you. My brain just wants to play and not think about love. And I thought, wow, how rude. But no, but I think, yeah, no, I think it's something I've always thought about. I think because this narrative is pushed on women that, I don't know, motherhood's everything. Don't get me wrong, it is absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I wouldn't want anything else for my life. But I think it can be all encompassing. And
Mhm.
again, it's this idea that the attachment trap of like, if you're not with your children all the time, that maybe you don't love them or you're not doing it well. But at the end of the day, we are fundamentally raising children who will become adults. We want them to be emotionally functioning and we want them to have good attachment levels. And I think, the goal is not to be their everything, it's to love them so well that they feel secure enough to go to other people, to build
Yeah.
other relationships. And that's how I now tweak it in my head. And now my son is 5, he's actually encouraging me to go and like almost do my own thing. And I'm like, okay, well, I have no choice actually but to build my own identity outside of motherhood. And I realize now that when we come back together, let's say for example, this is what I did, right? In the last few months, I realized that my children, they spend a lot of time with other
Mhm.
adults that they love and they feel safe with. Every time they left the house, what I do is I actually leave the house as well. I go to gym, I go for a walk, and
Uh-huh.
I found that this it's just given me so much in sense of like I'm not waiting for them to come back. I'm like literally doing something for myself while they're out. So when they come back, I'm just like I meet them with love, I meet them with stories, I meet them with like not like I've been waiting. And I just think, wow, well, what it just makes me feel that I have so much more to give when I have that rather than kind of hovering, waiting,
Uh-huh.
even though it feels like it's a version of love.
Yeah, no, no, bang on, bang on. And I think, I know you mentioned something where, I mean, my husband says this, so I want to make sure it's attributed to him and not me. But he always says that the job of a parent is to raise children so that they can function as adults without you in their life. And so, he also unfortunately lost his parents young. And so he is very, very sort of clear that we need to make sure our kids are raised in a way that in case something happens to one of us, either of us, they can function, right? Because he's seen that like you've seen it, like life can just throw weird curveballs at you. And so whatever's age appropriate, it's important for the umbilical cord to be gradually sort of cut and them being weaned off us, not because you don't want them to be close to you, but you do want them one day to become humans who can operate in the world in case you're not around. Because I also see some kids right now, I mean, I'm very close to my parents, but it's not sort of it's more now like a relationship of equals where we hang out and we talk as adults and I take advice from them, but I sometimes push back. But I also have friends who are just completely dependent on their parents. They cannot take a decision without like an okay from their parents, right? And I'm like, you're 30 years old, or like you're in your 30s, this is crazy. And so I think some of it just starts, like, I'm not saying it has to start at age 1, but I think age appropriately we need to start like helping give our kids the confidence of being able to operate without us 24/7 around them.
Wow, thank you for that. Yeah. We'll start to wrap up because I know time is fast spent, but I definitely want to talk about I think this idea of beyond the summit, beyond motherhood, beyond married children. Because I definitely think for me, I've always often thought that it's not the summit, it's a base camp. I think love shapes us in marvelous ways. Almost sets us off into the world. So I'd love to hear like if you look if you were to look forward into your children being grown ups,
Mhm.
how do you want them to remember this chapter of your lives?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I said, I'd want them to know that, they were always sort of a priority for me, even though their mom did a bunch of things outside of being a mother, that whenever they needed me, I was there for them. And we have happy, fun memories together. The second thing, as I mentioned, that I sort of gave them the skills where, as they're both girls, right? And God knows women need this because the world keeps taking away your confidence, and that their mother gave them sort of the skills, and the confidence in themselves and who they are as women to sort of lead lives that they want to lead. Like I sort of help them develop the confidence to fully sort of grow into who they are, right? I feel like kids are, you don't sort of mold them completely to become mini versions of you. I think they are, like you said, their own personality, and you almost sort of lightly guide them to become that. And I hope I unlock whatever their special talents are in them, and they feel when they've grown up that, they grew up in a household where they had the support and the love to sort of grow into whoever they want to grow into. And then the third thing, again, because they're women, I think a lot about this a lot, that as they think about, maybe if they want to be moms, they think of their mother being a happy person enjoying motherhood. I think a lot of people look back on their mothers and they remember her as being burnt out or resentful or exhausted. And I don't want my daughters to feel that way. I want them to feel like their mom was living their best life while raising them, and she was having the time of her life. And I'm obviously leaving back a body of work, as are you. I think it'll be interesting. Maybe one day our kids will stumble onto some of these conversations, and I don't know how they'd react to it, but I'm hoping as they read through all this, they know that them coming into my life added a lot more to my life than took
Yeah.
from me, right? Because I don't want. I know a lot of mothers invariably, it's in moments when they're angry with their kids, or just sometimes they're resentful, or they say things like, "Oh, because of you, I'm blah blah blah. Because of you, I had to give up that." I don't want them ever to feel that way. I want them to feel that because of them, my life became richer, more colorful, and we had a beautiful sort of time together. Versus I became a mom, and them coming into my life took things away from me. So maybe those two three things.
No, I get that. I definitely get that. I think I've often thought about, what ended this, but I've often thought about how I optimize motherhood to enjoy it.
Yeah,
And well, number one is my thermal, my flask, hot coffee on the go. For me, it honestly makes me feel like I'm winning in the park.
yeah,
I often think about even like working. I feel like even though I'm working at a lot less kind of time constraints, I feel like being a mother has definitely allowed me to look at the world in much more fun, joyous ways. I think about things like novelty, novelty that my children have taught me to stop and observe things I never thought I would care about, like excavator in the field, a tractor, fire engine. So that, I think definitely that side of me. And I think also been able to have more fun. There's been a lot of chaos for me the last few months. There's
yeah,
been a lot that's gone wrong, even at work. But I feel like children kind of make you realize that maybe we take things really seriously, and it's taught me to definitely just like lower the pressure on myself and just be more in the moment.
yeah.
What do you think? What do you think? Like finally, like your journey of motherhood brings to you in that way that makes it
Yeah, no,
like
it's I think it is a lot of that. And one incident, and then I'll end the question. I was recently, we were coming back from a long vacation, and there was a lot of turbulence on the flight back, like god awful amount of
yeah.
turbulence. And I'm someone who flies a lot for work, right? And I was like, okay, this plane is probably going down. I was like so nervous, and my daughter was like having the time of her life, right? I'm like, okay, this is strange, and she was like, oh my god, this feels like we're on a roller coaster. And that's what it made me, to your point, it made me realize that life is small, life is brief. And I think there's something fun as to, I mean, there's that, obviously children are naive, they don't know how things can go wrong, but it's fun to reframe things and be like, yes, either I could like spend the next 2 hours panicking, or like her, I could smile and enjoy the ride. But I think for me, the big thing that I want to do with life is, I mean, I use the word unrushed now. I want to live my life unrushed, right? This idea of, um, yes, life is small, life is brief, it goes by pretty quickly, but we don't have to rush through everything. I think we're constantly running, and I know more so here in North America than in other parts of the world, but that's this thing of constantly hyper optimizing everything, multitasking, trying to cut the jump through the yellow light because you don't want to wait for 5 more seconds or 10 more seconds for the other one, or sort of rush through your coffee and rush through your email, and listen to a podcast and be doing the groceries and be cooking on the side. It's just, I have realized that in life, like, it's okay to be unrushed, and that's the word sort of for the last, I think, 2 years I've been trying to live, where it's, this too shall go, right? Like, what's the worst that'll happen? I will miss this flight, I'll take another one. I will
Wow.
miss this red light. or I'll miss this green light, I'll go in the next one, right? Like, so I think that is the big thing that I'm trying to live and like show my kids, this idea that life is not something you have to rush through. There is nothing at the end that you're running towards. It's happening, as we've discussed, it's happening right now, right here. And it's a little bit about just, I don't even want to use the word slow down, because I feel like I have been so busy and I've done so much and I've lived so much life ever since I've decided to be unrushed. But I think it's a little bit about observing and absorbing and just enjoying the moment, right? Like I mean, the other day, it was early in the morning. My husband was on one side of the bed. My older one decided to jump into the bed. My baby was crying, so from her crib, I got her to the bed. Our dog jumped in, and the sun was coming out, and I was like, "This is it, right? This is everything I've dreamt of." And when it's time for me to leave this earth, these are the images that'll come back. And yes, I'm sleep deprived and I'm exhausted, and this baby is not sleeping, and the dog's on my feet for some reason and not moving, and I'm about to fall off this bed. But I mean, that picture is what I mean, that idea of being unrushed was just taking a mental snapshot and saying, I am so blessed and this is perfect, right? It's literally how God up there would have painted a picture of a happy, blessed family where all of us are on this big giant bed, and spring is coming and the sun is coming, and it's all wonderful.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, we have to end it there. That's just perfect. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, so I am very online, very millennial. So you can find me practically on all sort of social media, text-based social media sites. I'm on all of them: LinkedIn, X. I still tend to use Twitter. I'm on Threads. On Instagram, you can find me at Decks and Diapers. That's what I usually use. And then I'm on Substack. I write Decks and Diapers, and so if anybody wants to sort of connect with me there, I am available there too. But yes, I'm very online, and you will be, whatever social media site you use, there's a high probability you can stumble and find me there.
Oh, love it, Rashi. Thank you so much for just being you, the work you do. Thank you guys for joining us on this episode. And don't forget to like, to share, subscribe, tell a friend, to tell another friend. Leave us 5-star reviews, nothing less. And I will see you on the next one. Take care.
Bye.